wonder if we could start maybe just talking a little bit about the process of figuring the story out and why it did feel so vulnerable to you.
Well, I think the reason why it felt like vulnerable is because I tried to, in the expression of emotions, I tried to challenge myself more than I did before, even though I think that, again, it's a continuous movement, from film to film. You kind of try to challenge and address, the dark corners within yourself, the places you don't want to go to. And if you don't want to go to, it's probably where you have to go. And here it's really about, when I finished Titan, I really, even after Cannes and stuff like this, I thought about it, and obviously the entire structure of Titan is a build-up towards the emotion at the end, the last 15 minutes and the acknowledgement and expression of this and the unconditional love between these people who were strangers and who were not meant to meet and to like each other even. And then we end Titan with this I love you. And this I love you was very problematic to me in many ways. So I originally, when I wrote the film, I put it in, I wrote it out, I wrote it in, I wrote it out. And then when we were shooting, I did takes with, takes without, takes with, takes without. And the same in edit room, edit in, edit out. And at one point, I was like, what the fuck is my problem with these words, Like, there is clearly a blockage here. And this blockage was weird to me because I love you are the words that are the most said in all movies, in all languages since the dawn of cinema. So I pinpointed something in me that was up. And I think I decided for the next one to try to address that, frontally, and to create a movie that was one big I love you from A to Z, and to confront myself to the words, the verbal expression of love, which I've always was shy about. I'm shy about words in general because my first two features are not very talkative, and I always try to think about my scenes first in terms of image and sound, and the dialogue come afterwards. And it doesn't necessarily, and I just don't put any dialogue in that scene. There are still some of them in Alpha. But here, because it's a lot about taboos, it's a lot about what's left unsaid in a genealogy that creates a taboo around the trauma that was never processed. I thought that my characters could not escape, naming things, naming the trauma in order to overcome it. And so I had to confront myself to words as well, and to the expression of love and of everything, of hurt as well, and so that made me vulnerable very much, because this is something that, it's a tool that I thought I didn't have yet, and I need that film in order to gain it. So.
I think in your films a lot of fathers and daughters, and in this film we have a mother-daughter relationship. We also have this relationship between an estranged uncle and his niece. And it's this really fascinating, very rich, thorny set of family dynamics you establish between the three of them. How did those come to you? And again, what was that sort of personal point for you where you saw this trio as kind of important to what you wanted to say?
Well, it's true that my mom started to find it weird that there was no mom in my previous films. I mean, I kind of owed it to her because she was being a little bit offended, So, no, but the thing is that's another reason also why this film made me vulnerable, because my two previous films, all my films are stories of emancipation. So obviously emancipation towards your parental figures, towards society as well, and towards the representation that society tries to impose on you. And to obviously break free from all of this. And with the first two, I explored the emancipation from the paternal look on you. And, this is an equally, hard and dysfunctional relationship. But the thing is that when we talk about emancipating from the father figure, we talk about emancipating from an external look on you. And this external look on you can, believe me, it's not easy to do either, and because it can also like spread out onto the, transfer it onto the look of society on you. And if you feel that you haven't been looked at, that you haven't been considered by this paternal figure, then you can get like pretty neurotic as far as your relationship to society is. So it is a difficult emancipation as well. But it is possible to overcome it and put a stop to it because it's external. The emancipation from the maternal figure is a whole other business because the bond between mother and children is a bond that is prior to everything. And it's a bond that is symbiotic, that is fusional, and that never ceases, ever. We say that actually when a woman is pregnant, she keeps cells of the baby after the pregnancy. She keeps cells of the baby within her forever and vice versa. So you think even biologically there is something that seems inescapable there, almost, And the question for me, as far as this is concerned, and that is actually portrayed in the relationship between Alpha and her mom, which is incredibly codependent and fusional, also due to the fact that she's an only daughter with a single mom, and it's just the two of them. The question was like, how do you emancipate from that? How in Alpha's case, how do you stop being the recipient of your mom's trauma, and hence, how do you put a stop to this codependency? And when it will always be there. And I think that although I don't have like a definite answer in real life, because I'm just like you and I'm just trying to figure out what's happening, but the end, the kind of answer, or actually the end of the journey for Alpha that I found, is that she becomes the mom of her mom. And that's why mom doesn't have a name. Mom is mom throughout the entire film because she's mom with a capital M. She's mom to Alpha, she's mom to her brother, she's mom to all the patients, and she's mom to everyone who's in need for care. She's someone who is like on such a mission that she's an abnegation of herself almost. And so she becomes a figure in a way. And I think that the way Alpha sees her in the last scene, you see this distance, the fact that mom is in a wide shot and we are so close to Alpha, and this distance is important because the distance to me conveys the idea that she no longer sees her as mom or the mom, but as a woman, as a person, as someone who has tried, who has failed, who has broken, who has tried to stand up again, and as basically a human being. And I think that was Alpha's journey, to detach from that and to, in the end, find a way to become herself. And unfortunately, it often implies being aware of your own loneliness in this world when you finally manage, to get this distance. But at the same time, it's an absolutely necessary thing to do. So,
and to explore loneliness in the context of an epidemic, as you do in this film, is, I think, very central to what you're talking about as well. You can feel the paranoia, the kind of immense sense of loss surrounding her at all times in the movie. I believe you talked about feeling inspired by the fear of the AIDS epidemic. What came about societally from that, and how you kind of devised the world of your film. You built the world of your film. Can you talk about that a little bit?
But the world of my film is like, it is the world as it was in the 80s and 90s in my mind, as I remember it. Obviously the work on memory that also Alpha does throughout the entire film, the work of memory is a work that is never objective. It's always connecting the dots between what you think you remember but got distorted through times, what people told you, so it's from a tear, so you cannot actually verify the truth of that. It's about also the thing that you fantasize, that you idealized, and so in the end, I think that we, through memory, will create our own cohesive pattern, but this pattern will remain a myth forever, and your life will be the myth of your own. And actually that's why I started the movie on this, connecting the dots on Amit's arm. By the way, sorry, can I have water? I'm extremely dry. It's just, sorry, I apologize, but then at some point I won't be able to go on. And so the thing is that I digressed on the thing of memory, and you started with?
The setting, so from your memory,
yeah, exactly. The thing is that to me, it's not that it's inspired; it's that it's directly what I think that I have lived and witnessed at this time. But the thing is that since my film is so subjective, and actually all my films are, it's a lot about what the journey of the characters and how the person feels or remembers things. I knew I wouldn't make a historical film, a film that would be accurate as far as what really happened objectively at the time, which cannot be not political, because the AIDS crisis was also a very political crisis. And it's synonym with a battle that ACT UP led, and that it is synonym with resistance in many ways. So this is actually facts, but that was not the angle that I took. The angle I took is someone who tried to, again, try to find a way between what she thinks happened and living the trauma, reliving the trauma in order to just move on and come over it. And so I decided to take a step aside from the fact that I am actually addressing the AIDS crisis, but I did not use the symptoms of AIDS. Considering that it's not a historical film, I thought it would have been, performative, if not blasphemous, to actually prey on that in order to actually talk about one person's experience of it. And so yeah, that's what I was saying, is that I hear a lot about the word metaphor when it comes to the film. I don't think it's a metaphor of AIDS. I think it's the AIDS crisis. I think it addresses it directly, and if it's a metaphor or an allegory of something, it's of today. Because the reason why I came, thank you so much. The reason why I started working on that film, which was not my first choice. I had started on writing on something else before, and I threw everything away after 9 months of development, and my producers were furious. But then I thought, what's happening today, and I had already started when I started writing this, is basically the experience of waking up for all of us every morning and having one more shock to just handle and try to cope with during the day, waking up with a knot in your stomach, with the fear of the future, the uncertainty of the future, the powerlessness, the constant shock, and also the feeling that we cannot purge this because this is happening now. And yet these emotions are very present. And so in order for me to purge this feeling that we're all feeling now, and without being able to fictionalize the present, because again, we don't have the historical distance to it, I decided to transfer these emotions to the first time that I actually thought that we were in a world that was about to come to an end, which is the 80s and the 90s. Fucking long answer, I apologize.
Not at all. Well, it's complicated, right? And your films are always so imaginative. And in this case, what you're describing versus what we see on screen is fascinating to me, because the way you realize these people as they are dying it's almost sacred in the way that you depict them. And
Yeah.
I'm interested in that also from a technical point of view, what the challenges were in how you envisioned that, and then how you went about executing that.
So the thing is that the vision of it came pretty early. It's almost at the basis of the project. So after what I told you about the reason why I decided to take a step aside as far as the reality of the disease was concerned, well, I came to the moment very quickly of thinking, okay, but what is this disease? What is it going to look like? What's the iconography, and also what's the meaning of it? So obviously, talking about sacredness is very accurate. I chose marble for a reason. Marble is a very noble material that is usually used only to portray people that our society deems being above us, like saints and kings and stuff like this, everything we see in temples, and churches and all that. So it's really delegated to a higher rank of humanity in a way. And I decided to reclaim this in order to revere and somehow memorialize the life and the death of people who have been deemed lesser than society, that have been shunned and painfully abandoned by everybody. And so you see the choice was immediate. However, it's not because I thought about it right away that it was not a constant philosophical or ontological, if you wish, question that I ask myself constantly, because after having decided this, I thought very naively, oh, I want people to see them as beautiful. But the problem with beauty is that it's a concept that pretends to be objective under false pretense, because it's not an objective concept at all. The standards of beauty have changed since the dawn of humanity. At every era, we have new standards that mostly women have to abide by, men a little bit as well, mostly women. And they change constantly. And so it proves that there is nothing objective to this. And also what I'm going to find beautiful, you might find super ugly or bland or, repelling. And obviously, being very aware of the reputation of my first two features, I was really scared that people were setting themselves up to be repelled and to be disturbed and all this. And all I wanted to create for my characters and for all the patients who are infected in the film is love and empathy and understanding, and more importantly, to always see them as humans, never as creatures, but to really keep it grounded into our common humanity. And so the question of beauty is a conundrum, because no matter what I could have come up with, there would be someone or many people in any audience that would have found it disturbing and repelling. This is something you cannot control, And so I was very, very disturbed by that, because to me, it would have been again extremely heartbreaking that anyone would have this look on my character, on any patients of the film. And then I wrote the scene, in the waiting room where she runs into her English teacher who's with his companion. And the companion jokes about the fact that if his mom was still there, she would find him beautiful, like an Apollo, like a Greek statue, and all this. And in that way, I'm kind of thinking that the only objectivity we could find in the look would be a mother's look on their child. I think that's the only objectivity that matters, even though it's extremely subjective, but it can become objective because it's a sacred look. And then she answers, no, but you're beautiful, that's true. And when I wrote this line, I projected myself in directing the actress who would be Melissa, who would interpret Alpha. And I thought, mental note for later, you have got to tell her that she really means it. It's not a bullshit polite thing, or she's not out of social awkwardness or whatever. We see since the beginning of the scene that she's the only one who doesn't have a backward movement when he enters. She's actually quite curious about the way he looks. She doesn't portray any form of disgust or unease next to him. She's just maybe a little too curious, like teenagers or children can be, because she's not aware that she's annoying him. But that's it. And so when I thought she needs to mean it, I thought, okay, but then my point of view as me on what's beautiful and what's not has no relevance at all. The only important thing is her point of view, because her point of view guides you into, looking at him. And if she finds him beautiful, then everyone's going to find him beautiful. And no matter what he looks like, no matter what kind of iconography I come up with. So that was the first part of the question. I'm going to go very fast on the second part. 50% practical effects, makeup, silicone, and 50% CGI to rigidify the silicone, which is a very soft and matte material. So basically, when someone breathes with silicone prosthetics, you can see the torso doing this, which doesn't work obviously with stone, and it doesn't reflect light because it's matte. And so all the specks of light, in order to give this polished look, we had to recreate in CGI, and it's the entire result. We were never sure until the end of post-production if it would really work or not, because it was such a I was going to say a Titanic work.
Maybe that's the right word.
I can't even watch that movie anymore. I can't even say, let's watch Titanic, everyone laughs. So, but so yeah, it's always a mix, but the interesting thing is that it was a very big bet, because obviously we didn't have 300 million to do that, so you can imagine. And we started working on it like even a year before production, talking with both CGI and practical. And yeah, I had cold sweats until the last minute, even though I trust them 100%, but like, they used like techniques that they had never used before and stuff like this, and yeah, that was interesting. But in the end, they did a crazy job, I think. Yeah.
Incredible the way it came out. Unfortunately, we are at time. We have to run to another Q&A. But Julia, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.
And that's, I would imagine, not an easy choice to discard that. So talk about.
It was actually.
It was? Okay. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's not because it was bad. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was bad, but that's only the point. It's just that after 9 months, and that's probably actually a normal reaction, is that I realized that this movie that I put in the garbage overnight, really, it wasn't that hard. And it's because I was just, I had the feeling that I was just, repeating myself. That basically I was trying to reproduce recipes that had worked in Titan or in raw. And this is so barren, it's a barren ground. I think you should never try to reproduce any form of recipe, because what's been said is said, what's been done, and you're not gonna, if you've been true to yourself in the past, you're never gonna, be able to say it any better. And also you evolve, so you have to kind of like be in touch with the fact that you're not the same person than the person who made the previous film, like, 5 years ago or something. And so I really felt like I was just trying to stay in what I thought was a comfort zone. But I think that nothing good gets ever made when you're in a comfort zone. And so I threw it away because I think honestly that making movies is a lot about tackling your own dark corners, like everything that you don't want to see in yourself, that you don't want to address within yourself. I think when you think that you don't want to go somewhere, that's where you have to go. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I do that.
This is not repeating yourself in any way in this movie, right? This feels like completely new territory for you in a very exciting way. I would imagine it did feel scary at times. What scared you the most about this project?
I think what scared me the most was the question of the distance to it. Because at the same time, I have no distance to it. These are, the memories that I have of this time period, the 80s and the 90s, and the society that I remember there, which felt like so dark age, so medieval, so backward in so many ways, because of the fear, that has seeped into every fucking corner of humanity, and that had led an entire world to blame and shame a fringe of the population who hadn't done anything else than just like being physical distress, unfortunately, and need for care. And so because the disease impacted my family, and that my family was on this, wrong end of society, I was afraid that I was gonna have either not enough distance or too much, because you're kind of scared of not hitting the right note, the emotional right note with, I want to say, a form of decency, and I knew from the get-go it was going to be a melodrama. I've written it like a melodrama. I think I had a lot of hurt to purge in there, and I think that nowadays we all have a lot of hurt to purge, and I think that movies are definitely the right place to, the theaters are the right place to go to for that nowadays, and it's good to cry together. But
in order to respect that form of the right distance, I set myself some limits. For example, of a limit that's very practical. I forbade myself to shoot close-ups of a needle getting into a vein, because for me that would have been completely performative. I mean, it's very clear what it's about. I mean, we've seen needles all the way and all that, and also I think making a close-up. I think that making any shots has to have a meaning and has to somehow always affirm what your vision is towards your topic. And to me, a close-up on a needle in a vein would have essentialized in the worst way possible the character of Amin, meaning that it would have meant that he was defined only by his addiction and his affliction. And I never thought of him like this, ever. I actually, when I wrote him, I tended to just somehow put that away, you know, and just, even in the scene when he's in physical distress, I would only think about his distress and how he feels physically, and not think about the cause of the distress. And in many ways, what for me the biggest challenge was to understand who he was, because he's a complicated character. He's extremely contradictory. He's very childish and very wise at the same time. He's there, not there, as you've probably understood, literally and metaphorically. And he's very chilling, and at the same time very warm. And all this were, notes that were important to me to relate to him, to layer him and to relate to him. So that's a long answer to say no close-up on needles.
Melodrama, I think, it's an interesting genre for you, to kind of go into that. You mentioned writing it that way. What did that mean dramatically, structurally, when you're actually working within that kind of format? I'm curious how you applied that to this story.
Well, as I said just before, so the first thing for me was I really needed to purge emotions that we are all feeling right now. I told you before, all these feelings of powerlessness, of shock, of fear of the unknown, of not knowing when we will fucking reach rock bottom. Because I'm willing to reach rock bottom so that there is a rebound afterwards. But unfortunately, I think that you realize when you hit rock bottom, just retrospectively, it's not something that you can see coming or live really on the moment, which makes things kind of unbearable in terms of waiting and all this. And so all these feelings that we're feeling now and that I'm feeling were very hard for me to fictionalize, because there is no distance to it. So I don't feel like I can write a story about what's happening right now. I mean, I can't even process it every morning and intellectualize it really. And so yet these emotions are there, and I needed to do something with them, and that's why these emotions brought me back during this time period of the 80s and the 90s, which is the first time in my life where I really had the feeling that the world was going to come to an end, that the world was actually cannibalizing itself. And at the time, I was an alpha in the world of Omega. I was someone who was starting her life in a world where everybody was dying and where your most healthy instinct of birthing sexuality, interest and stuff like this would make you, either already dead or a potential murderer, and nothing was healthy about this. Just growing up was deemed not healthy anymore. And that was actually very terrifying, and also seeing how people were so disposable was very terrifying. The sense of loneliness that there was at the time, it really struck me, and that explains a lot about the choice of light and grading in the present timeline of the film, which is really meant to make you feel the loneliness of the character, how metallic it is, how desaturated it is, how harsh it is on them. It's really meant to make you feel that the society is no longer unified at all, and it's well, one person for their own sake, and there is no help coming. That's very dark, what I'm saying, but hence the melodrama. And I think melodrama is a very good way, as I said before, to like purge all this and to, if nowadays everything is done for us to be numb. We're distracted constantly. They always tell us that something else is happening somewhere else, and usually it's like a little kitten that's cute. And they ask us to look at this kitten in order to not feel the right things at the right moment. And the numbness is absolutely normal, and we all fall prey to that. And I think that again, being able to catharsize this together and to cry over this together is a good way to fight that numbness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a catharsis in feeling that purge even. I'd love to open it up to some questions. Anyone's got one for Julia? Yes, you, sir.
I have two questions about two moments in the movie.
Could you speak up a little bit, please, because I'm there for one ear.
Okay, I have two questions about two moments in the movie that resonated with me.
Yeah.
One has to do with Alpha in the classroom when they're listening to the text being read, and the professor asks her to explain, and she mentions a dream within a dream. And I'm wondering if this is related to the layering of time in the movie. The other one, at some point there's a TV on, and I believe there's a scene of the adventures of Baron Munchausen. And my question is a little bit about if the mother of Alpha is like this Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I don't know if I'm just reaching out.
Not at all. No, you're right on point. I mean, my answer is going to be very brief, which is not, common with me. Just a little, just to rectify a little thing. So the poem that he reads from the beginning is indeed entitled "A Dream Within a Dream." It's an Edgar Allan Poe poem. But she says, so dreaming within a dream, it means that nothing is real or that it's even a nightmare. And so that's the first switch to it, the thing that it's actually a nightmare. What if it's just a nightmare within a nightmare, not a dream within a dream? So it does says a lot about the timelines and the intertwining of the timelines and the kind of way to get lost, into this maelstrom of trauma. And this is a hint at this, obviously. Everything is meant to feel that you're lost within these two timelines until it merges in this hotel room, which is the place where the trauma really happened for her, and witnessing what happened between her mom and her uncle. And the reason why I wanted you to feel like spiraling in this maelstrom is because it is a very immersive and subjective film, as most of my films are. And this one being about trauma, I wanted to respect the timeline of trauma. And the timeline of trauma is not linear. It's impossible to me, if you're going to make an immersive film about this, to make a film that is going to go from A to B. Because the time of trauma is a time where the present doesn't even exist almost. It's a present that is constantly assaulted by resurgences of the past through panic attacks, nightmares, visions, like cold sweats, like flashes and stuff like this, constantly assaulted, and also at the same time engulfed in the anticipation of the future for fear of things happening again. And so you're constantly pushed back and forth between past and future, in a present that's almost never there. And you see it's almost like a Bermuda Triangle for me, this. And so I wanted to respect this timeline of trauma within the structure of my film in order to have you let's say, experience the journey towards the resolution of the trauma which happens in the hotel room at the end. And so to really follow her trajectory. And the second question, obviously, of Baron Munchausen, yes. So the first reason is because that was one of my favorite films when I was a child. Whatever, a child, and also yes, of course, because of the Munchausen by proxy. But I mean, mom's trajectory I think is interesting because she is someone that is not only very Cartesian, that is very pragmatic. I mean, she's a doctor. She believes in science, and she's grounded in so many ways. But her mission in life to save people kind of loses her in many ways, especially when she is submitted to the potential, the fear of losing again a loved one. And so at one point she starts losing, losing touch with reality, and we see this when she starts like summoning the ancestral beliefs of her own mom that we've seen her, negating and dismissing. And yet she, without, for fault of having an answer for out of powerlessness, she kind of goes back to it in a very desperate way, I think. And I mean, it's there to tell her that she's like on the wrong way. And I think it's interesting because within her you really have the how do you say, the juxtaposition of love and fear that is in movement, that is at work. Because love and fear to me are two sides of the same coin. The first moment you fall in love with someone, and the first moment that you see your child being born, your first instinct is to be afraid of losing that person. That goes with instantly. It's a reflex almost. And she is the embodiment of this, and also the embodiment of losing one's rationality as far as love is concerned. Because in love you have a responsibility towards the other, and your responsibility is to respect the other one's freedom. You cannot overbear that. If you love someone, you want them to be free. But when fear gets into the equation, you can overpass that, and you can abuse your power over them because you're losing them, which is exactly what she does. And I think it was interesting to me to explore this wide spectrum of what unconditional love means. It's not only the very idealized way I showed Titan in the end. It also has like another aspect to it, or many various aspects to it that are dangerous, And so Munchausen by proxy being a syndrome, or let's say a disorder that reflects that very much.
Thank you.
Long answer.
Yes.
I'm losing my English. I apologize for my accent. I'm very aware, but I'm tired and I have a terrible French accent. I'm so sorry. Hi.
Thank you so much. I love your films. I'm a person in recovery, and so I really appreciated the portrayal of addiction, and I was just kind of wondering if you could discuss how you wanted to portray that, because there's moments where, for example, Alpha is kind of yelling at him and saying that it's his choice to be an addict, but there's also like some acceptance at some point on his sister's part of like when she does shoot him up with the heroin. So yeah, I really appreciated the nuance to that. So I was just wondering if you could expand a bit more on what you're trying to get across.
Okay, so first thing, congratulations. The thing is that when Alpha tells him this, these lines I did not like writing them, but I had to. But she is being horrible at this moment. I mean, she's really being a brat. And she's saying at this moment, unfortunately, what many people think about addicts. Which means you're lazy, you could do it, you're just, you want to attract attraction and stuff like this. I think the focus point, and I end the scene on him, is how hurtful it is to him. To hear this from a child that he actually came to love, and care for. And I think that's the way I portrayed addiction was, again, by not fetishize, another word with fetishizing, thank you. Fetishizing it, and meaning that trying to obviously never lose the love for the person, and also, to not be naive about it. Like, we know that addiction makes you lose sense of the responsibility you have towards others, and tends to make you, the center of your own universe in your needs, in your addiction, in your pain inside, and that you have to satisfy. And definitely it can be extremely hard for the people around you, and I didn't want to be naive about this in many ways. And I think that the first thing is to not essentialize, love no matter what, and also I think within this there is a form of, I don't want to say maybe silver lining, is too strong a word, but I think he helps her by telling her the truth about this when he's in the parking lot, and on the beachfront. And before that, he said, listen, you understand, like, don't wake me up, whatever. And she's young, sure, but he's the only one who helps her make a step forward and talks to her as an equal. And doesn't try to sugarcoat anything, And I think in that way, I wanted to show a side that is not just detrimental to others, and that he was honest enough and loving enough to be clear about himself. And that's it. I don't know if it answers your question. Does it? Yeah. It's a tricky thing, because it's always a matter of, it was essential for me to not fetishize this, because I think that in movies it's very much fetishized. I hate the idea that it's cool or anything. That's why I was aiming at the thing with not being naive about it also. But I didn't make any research. I didn't need to. And Tahar did very much. He worked with an association in Paris who provides sterile gears to drug addicts and who opened shooting rooms as well. So he's been working there for 3 months. And came up like actually I don't know, incorporating all the people he met there and the acquaintances and the talks and things within him, which was actually both a little bit terrifying and extremely, extremely impressive in terms of sensitivity.
It's an amazing performance. Yeah. I have one more question. Yes, you should back.
You talked about the grade in the present day timeline being really stark. I was wondering if you had any different strategies for how you lit the two timelines, or if it was more in the color grade.
Sorry, say that again.
So you said the present day timeline, the color grade is really stark. I was wondering if you had a different lighting strategy for the two different timelines, or if it was more about the color grade for you.
No, we had two strategies from the get-go with Ruben by TV. And also, I think even with the set designer, in many ways. You see, for example, the two hotel lobbies that we changed the colors of the walls and all this, and this was a part of this as well. So for me, it was the tricky part is that I wanted them to look distinct, because I knew I did not want to have on screen written the years, because to me that's really like not trusting your audience at all. So I did not want to do that, and again for the reason that I said earlier, that I wanted to have a feeling of intertwining of the two timelines. But for me, it had to have a sense. So from the get-go, I told Ruben, listen, we're not going to do color, black and white, sepia, I don't know what else. Like, I wanted it to have a meaning as far as what does it say about these two periods and the difference between these two periods. And what I identify as being the difference between these two time periods, which are actually quite close in time, there is only 10 years in between, is the fact that from the 80s to the 90s, fear has seeped into the crevice of society, and in the 90s it's impossible to claim ignorance anymore. It's impossible to hide behind the fact that people don't know, because in the 90s people do know. That's why they are actually scared.
And that's why I wanted to portray this thing that was very, very lonely and very, very harsh. In the past, to me, it's the beginning. There is a form of, of unknown, of ignorance about it, although the abandonment has already started, but to me, it's contained within the walls of the hospital. And mom is the bearer, of, let's say, of the castle in a way. And to me, this period of time had to be nostalgic in a way. So I decided to go for a look that kind of reminds me of the disposal cameras we had at the time, which basically are everywhere in all my family albums. A very saturated color with a background that is kind of yellow greenish and very dark blacks, it's not necessarily pretty there, but it's very nostalgic. It's a certain time period. And also because at the time, at this moment, to me society was still unified, not like the present. It was still homogeneous. And so I wanted colors to be very, very saturated. I wanted the particles of colors to be close to each other and not completely sparse like it is in the present. For this thing of going from an homogeneous society to a heterogeneous one. And that's why I made this choice.
We are at time. Julia, thank you so much. Thank you also.